Okay, as the last person comes in, we're going to finally put Brigitte out of her misery so she can give her talk and let her get started. She'll be talking about towards understanding of plant rarity in KZN. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Just a brief overview of what I'm going to present today is on the slide. I won't go into it in detail for a minute. Small populations are more vulnerable to extinction than large ones, and they therefore attract the attention of conservationists. But rare species are not necessarily threatened, and not all threatened species are rare. And in this research, I aimed at exploring the determinants of rarity in KwaZulu-Natal. Oh, oopsie, sorry. I really did go a bit far, didn't I? Pushing the boundary. In this study, we defined rarity as population size, a product of population size and range size, or extent of occurrence. And this is not the same as Rabinovitz described rarity. She included a third variable, habitat specificity. But in this study, we actually explored habitat specificity as a determinant rather than a component of rarity. We hypothesized that plants would be rarer if they had a narrow ecological niche. They were highly habitat specific, they had a short dispersal distance, they had a stress tolerant survival strategy like those that occur in very stressed environments. They occupied islands of former larger land surfaces, and also if they were intensively utilized, or if their habitats had become largely transformed. In order to understand rarity, we developed a model that said basically that rarity is a function of niche width, habitat transformation, dispersal distance, habitat specificity, geological surface, and life history. A sampled number of plants were selected in a stratified manner from our list of KZN's rare and threatened species. And this was done with the objective of ensuring that we selected at least 9 plants from all the rare and threatened, the IUCN rare and threatened categories, and then we included some least concerned and common plants. Ecological niche width was derived from the product of a range in temperature, the range in precipitation, and the range in number of soil fertility classes in which the plants occurred. Habitat specificity was determined by a species fidelity to a non-matrix habitat, so it would be wetlands or scarp forests, or even those species that in the literature it was referred to that they were habitat specific, and they were classed as being habitat specific. And then dispersal distance, species were categorized according to their capacity for dispersal. This was by looking at the morphology of the seeds and whether they could in fact disperse further than 100 meters, then they were considered as long distance dispersers, and those that were perhaps didn't have the morphology to disperse long distances but were dispersed basically mainly by gravity, they were short dispersers or localized dispersers, and then medium dispersers were dispersal in between those classes. Life history strategy, I used grams as characteristics of competitive, stress tolerant and ruderal plants. Each species was scored against 9 characteristics, and then the position of each species on a ternary graph was determined by the proportion of competitive, stress tolerant and ruderal characteristics that each plant had. So, for example, with holothrix, the proportions of characteristics of competitive or competitive characteristics was 31%, and stress tolerant 25%, and ruderal 44% of the characteristics were ruderal. And then it obviously, plotting it on the graph, it came out as a competitive ruderal plant. The land surfaces, I used Partridge and Maud's map of erosional surfaces, using 5 of the major units, which I just used different distributions for each plant. And this data was classified to determine the plant's primary affinity with one or more of the land surfaces using principal components analysis and k-means cluster analysis. Obviously, human use was taken from the literature, none known, some, and highly utilized plants. And transformation of habitat was the proportion of habitat of the plant's transformed habitat within the plant's distributional range, or its minimum convex polygon. Initially, I looked at each individual rarity versus each individual variable compared with rarity. Rarity was not normal, so it was log transformed, as was a niche width. And as you can see, that niche width, the writing's very, very bad, but had the only really strong relationship was niche width. The others were very, very weak relationship between habitat specificity, and matrix species. The one unusual thing was utilization. It was quite interesting to note that here, in actual fact, that the very rare plants were actually not utilized. And then also there was the relation with habitat transformation was quite interesting, in that most species where most of their habitat was transformed were in actual fact rare. I then did some multivariate analysis to try and further understand the relation between the variables and rarity, and regression. I did a regression tree in CART, and using bootstrapping, it gave me the best tree, and then I pruned back that tree to use 10 nodes, which was, looking at it biologically, it was the most sensible number of nodes to use. CART gives you an importance score, which basically relates the importance of the variable throughout the whole tree, how important it is at each, as a primary splitter and as a secondary splitter. And as you can see, the niche width came out as a very important splitter. It split the tree initially with common species on this side and the rarer species on this side. It then further split the rare species all the way down until, basically habitat transformation came in, right at the end here. This is these are all the rarer species, as you can see, and on this side with the more common species, it was quite interesting that the most common species were actually species with the longest dispersal distance, and also with no affinity to erosional surface at all. I then looked at the linear models, and I first modeled included all the variables, and then in a backward step, removal of all the non-significant variables. The result, I ended up with only 3 variables: a log niche with habitat transformation and the geological surface. And both the models actually came out very, with very similar results, both showing a log niche width as very significant and no affinity to a geological surface. But then the generalized additive model included habitat transformation as having some sort of relation. The GAN model actually, was actually proved using the 8K information criterion, proved to be the better model. So, and from that, you can basically say that niche which has a strong relation with rarity, and rare plants are generally associated with narrow niche widths, and the rarest species had the smallest niche widths, and the most common species had the broadest niche widths, the largest dispersal distances, and no affinity to any land surface. And this was basically, there was an agreement with all the methods of the explanatory methods. And from this, for me, my interest is in prioritizing species for conservation action. So this research basically indicates that a narrow niche width is a very important criterion to include when you are prioritizing plants for conservation action, as they are most likely to be the ones that are most likely to be vulnerable to extinction. And I'm very lucky to have a whole lot of wonderful helpers, so thank you to them. Thanks.
Okay, we seem to be
rushing.
Yes. See, what is it? You were so anxious to get up here, and you sped through it. All right, so we have plenty of time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Might have missed it, but how did you determine the niche width?
I used the range in temperature, range in temperature, rainfall, and